You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today we are joined by veteran photojournalist and sports photographer Nick Didlick. Our topic, the evolution of technology in sports photography. When it comes to sports photography, Nick has been there, done that. He's photographed Super Bowls, the Olympics, NCAA Final Fours, the U.S. Open, and the Stanley Cup. About the only sporting event he hasn't shot is the Shinola Soapbox Derby, but he says he's working on it. Nick is the former director of photography at the Vancouver Sun, where he led the photo department's successful switch from film to digital. He was photo chief for the Vancouver 2010 Winter Olympics and twice has been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize as an agency photographer for Reuters and UPI. Nick is also an accomplished videographer, an educator, and a photo event producer. What's even more impressive, he's an accomplished fly fisherman. Welcome to our show.
Thanks. We're going to talk fly fishing?
Yeah, let's just do that.
It's my favorite subject.
There you go. I mean, it's okay with me.
Well, have you photographed fly fishing?
Yeah. Well, I've photographed lots of fly fishing, but I always joke with my friends because they always catch minnows, or what I call bait. Because when I go fly fishing, I'm in the 30-pound range of Chinook salmon or other salmon. So my favorite subject. But we can talk about photography.
Well, let's combine the two for a quick second. It is a sport. I mean, have you shot it for professional purposes?
Yes,
or
I've had numbers of pictures appear in fly fishing magazines worldwide. And one of the things that, because people always ask me, what's your favorite thing to photograph? And it would be the outdoors, getting way off the grid and photographing things like fly fishing or grizzly bears. That's what I do for recreation. If you follow my Instagram feed, you'll see that I have bear cameras in the woods right now. I'm really excited because I'm going to go back next week and go recover them. They've been there for 3 months. And the bears are jumping on salmon, and eagles are coming in, and wolves are going by, and there's all this really, really cool stuff.
And do you have a feed that you can check what's being photographed?
Yeah, I don't actually put it on feed, but it's on my Instagram feed at Nick Didlick. You can find it.
You have a motion detector that picks these?
Yeah. In fact, I bought them just down the street here at B&H because I actually order my bear cameras from there, and the evolution is quite interesting because I can put them in there for 8 months on AA batteries, and they're triggered by motion, and they'll photograph a bear day or night. So at night they swip into infrared, and you get these really cool, ominous looking. So you don't want to go camping there. I have, but you don't really want to go camping there because there's all sorts of stuff that comes by.
They have those same cameras here in the hallway. That's how they know when we're late.
Right. Yeah. With a time code. They should just pay you by the second.
I'm going to start talking slower.
Yeah.
Now, also, there is actually probably a real art to fly fishing photography, because especially if you're showing like casting and stuff, it's all about form.
Yeah, and actually, I would tell you it's more about light. Because when you have form, and you can have great form, but unless you have the light, it doesn't really play off the form very well. So I'm always looking for dark backgrounds, because when you have that dark background, and then you can see the loop of the line and the water spinning off of it, it gets this whole different appeal. And so depending on where you are, I mean, I fly fished in all over North America, Australia, and Europe, and depending on where you are, you're always looking for that light or that time of day, and then putting your subject in there. And when it all comes together, it's really magical.
I would imagine there are some challenges to shooting in water like that, especially rivers, because rivers tend to be at the lowest point, and quite often, like in the summer, your sun is pretty high, but like yesterday, I was actually trying to go out some shooting by some waterfalls near me for a project I'm working on, and the sun never quite made it over the ridge.
Right, so you need to go back a different time of year.
That's right.
Yeah, so the time of year is time of year for fishing, because different species of fish are in the river at different times, and then you got to try to match that to different times of day and light, and then right now with all the fall colors, so there's all this stuff. But it's the basis of photography. It's about light, and it doesn't matter whether you're shooting sports or whether you're shooting fly fishing. It's all about the light that you can be working in, and that really makes it magical. The problem with fly fishing is it's water, and cameras and water generally don't mix.
Right.
And I am actually a certified whitewater raft guide, so I used to guide a lot. In the last 3 years, I've been just doing too much in the summers to do any guiding. And so that was number one: protect the cameras, get the cameras out, shoot the pictures, put them back in, and then watching the evolution, because photography also evolves. So you'll see a lot of pictures now are taken from a very low angle, just off the water line, which we used to do years ago with a bucket and stuff like that. But now the cameras the technologies have changed, so with a tilt-up screen and all these other things that we can get right down on the water and photograph just the fish eye out of the water. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it, and it's all good fun.
All right, good place to start then.
There you go.
Evolution. I mean, because we're talking about evolution, maybe we can ask you what your first camera was and what your current camera is.
So I've had 3 brands in my lifetime. My first camera out of high school was a Konica T3 Auto Reflex.
I remember that.
And it was probably the hottest selling consumer camera at the time. And Canon was just emerging as a brand, and then, of course, Nikon was the brand. And so I had that, watched the Canon evolve to be the brand, but I moved from Konica to Nikon. And the reason, and we're talking like before you guys were born, probably, that we're talking 73, 74, and that I moved to Nikon because of the lens lineup, because I realized at the time if I was going to do this as a career, I was going to be time constrained, lens constrained with a Konica, and so I moved to Nikon, and I had a Nikon F. It was one of my first cameras in FTN, and then I worked with Nikon cameras for 41 years. And then technology, which we'll get into, I switched immediately to Sony A9. When that technology appeared just over 2 years ago, it was apparent that it was going to be the next generation. And as well, people always tell me they're trying to catch up.
And when, let's say, the Sony A7 came out, were you tempted at all, or was it just a matter of waiting for that right camera for your purpose?
Yeah, and I'd done some teaching on Sony cameras back in 2000, so I was watching the technology develop into SLTs, and that I realized, well, that's kind of a hybrid. It's not going to really go anywhere.
It was almost, but not quite.
Yeah, and I think Sony realized it was almost not quite, but they knew that they had something else, and so they basically backed away. For about 3 years, you didn't hear anything, and then A7 started. And it was kind of interesting, but sensor refresh rates and some of the other things doesn't lend itself to action photography.
Yeah, the autofocus was not the quickest either on that.
But when Canon had autofocus, I was still Nikon. I was just smarter than the other Canon photographers. That's what I used to tell them at Olympics, right? Yeah. They're shooting a bunch of frames coming through, but when you analyze something, you realize there's a peak of action. It doesn't matter what you shoot. And if you're a smart guy, you can still get that peak of action, even though you're manually focusing, which is how I started doing Olympics. Everybody was manually focused when you get down to it. So it wasn't so much the autofocus speed, it was the refresh rate of the sensor. Because you'd see Jello Cam, for instance, a person would be running and all of a sudden they have really skinny legs and then they have normal sized legs. Well, that doesn't kind of work for me. And so while I watched it, I just kept watching it while I was still shooting Nikon. It's okay to mention brands here, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah,
we do that. We do it all the time.
Well, you know what? And I'll just say one other thing about it. Cameras, in photography, there's 2 things. There's the technical and there's the emotional. And on the emotional side, that's the connection that we'd have when I'm taking your picture, for instance, and doing those other kinds of things. But we also become emotionally attached to a brand. And that I know when I lectured on different cameras, I always tell people, don't underestimate the emotional attachment that somebody has to a brand. I'd never tell you to switch. The time you want to switch is when you're losing to your competition as a professional photographer. And there's this huge emotional attachment, which, I still have for my friends at Nikon. There's some really, really great people there. They have a good camera. It's always emotional. And I always think of behind the viewfinder, the emotions that you go through, but also in front of the viewfinder, the emotions you go through.
Are you talking about the Z series now, or has that the Nikon? Is that going to change your mind back, perhaps?
No. Yeah, no.
Okay. Can you clarify that, please?
No. People, the largest problem with photographers is that they're not very technical when it comes down to it, most of them. They are not thinking about, they're thinking about the light on your eyes and this is how I'm going to capture it. But they don't understand the tools that they are using them. And I think we used to know our tools a lot better back in the old days. There was less things going on.
They were less complex. You had shutter speeds, you have stops and ISO. That was
right.
it.
Yeah, and the ISO was depending on what type of film you stuck in it. And then you had emotional attachment not only to the camera you're using, but to the Fujifilm because the Fujifilms because it looks so good, or the Kodachrome, or those types of things. Well, now there's so many choices, and trying to keep up with that pace of change is really difficult. And I think that, if photographers wiped their brains clean and then looked out there, they'd realize how that landscape is changing. And the hardest part for people of my age is unlearning. I have you mentioned, the conversion to digital. Well, we had 17 staff photographers that we had to change to a digital camera. I had to teach those 17 how to unlearn all the stuff they had learned about film, to bring it back and teach them how to shoot a digital picture. And I'm doing the same thing now. That, with an A9 or other cameras, you got to unlearn all this DSLR, which I call a hybrid electrical camera, because basically it's still all moving parts, but it has a sensor on it, to an electronic camera that's 100% electronic, because all sorts of things are different about it, and you have to learn that.
And how did you learn it? Do you by just playing with it, using it, or do you someone that digs deep into the
I usually just stick an electric prod in my head and just clear the memory. there is no, it's actually using equipment. And I own a piece of everybody else's equipment. Like I if you looked in my camera closet, I have a Fuji, a Panasonic, a Nikon, a Canon, and a whole bunch of Sonys. And that's how I learn. Like there is certain things that you'll notice as Canon and Nikon photographers catch up to where Sony is, those users are going to have the same problems that I went through 2 years ago. And it's really interesting to watch how that evolution works. And so that's one of the biggest problems with technology, because it's changing fast, and the ability for users to keep up with it. I mean, really, the form factor of a camera doesn't have to be that form factor. It's our brains adapting to that device, and that's how we interface. And so I think some of the big changes you're going to see over the next bunch of years, we're going to refine how we think and control a camera. Because it could be a box.
It is a box. That's the word for it, right?
Yeah. But it's a box that you hold on to. But why do you have to hold on to it? Why can't you just program it all with your cell phone and say, okay, yeah, that's what I want you to do, and then just pick up the box and push the button, right?
Or not even push the button,
right? Right. That's right. Yeah. Or just tell it to take when you smile.
That's what you're doing with your bear photos.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's all programmed and the way it goes, right? It just they're just sitting up there making great pictures for me.
Yeah.
That would be a great thing. Imagine, you wouldn't even have to come here. You could just have me come sit in here, and it would be great.
Or we could just send you a microphone wherever you are.
That would even be better.
Yeah, and a list of questions, and there you go.
Yeah, but I'm not getting paid that much.
I want to go back to one thing. You mentioned that a lot of photographers, about the resistance of going to the next thing. Is it resistance of learning something new, or is it a matter of being comfortable and understanding what your current gear can do and can't do, and how to anticipate? So you basically, anything that you own photographic, or any car that you drive for that, and you learn, what it does, what it doesn't do, when to hit that shutter button, how much you have to anticipate in advance before everything else, and you learn it. And I think that might be part of the factor where you get so comfortable, where you're going in and you're comfortable and you're confident with what you have, and now to drop all that and to learn something new, especially on a job, we're saying, okay, am I going to screw this up? There's a learning curve there.
People hate change.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. They hate change. And that's probably the biggest issue that you have to deal with. So when you deal with a group of photographers, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. The only time they'll change is if their competitor is actually getting more business than them. And then they'll say, well, it can't be my competitor. Even the guy's a better photographer. It's got to be his gear.
Got to be the gear.
It's got to be the gear. And this is how I've led change before. It's got to be the gear. Well, yeah, it is the gear, but it's also thinking and working smarter. So the biggest hurdles are change is difficult. And when you change, because you've learned a control set or a camera set, you have to unlearn that and bring it in. Photography hasn't really changed. Shutter speed, aperture, ISO, you mentioned. But how we approach those things has changed. And the bigger changes are in autofocus, highlight detail, some lighting things. All those other things are developing, the same way. I mean, we're here, in an LED lit environment. Well, when we get to pulsing LEDs that we can sync at 1/288,000th of a second, that's going to be cool. And that type of stuff is being worked on now.
Well, that's I guess a good segue to let's start talking specifically about some sports photography technology. The Olympics are often like a petri dish, aren't they, for new technology, right? I mean, has that been your experience?
Yeah, it's always been that way. Before Summer Olympics, so the Olympics used to be separated out, right? We used to see they were in the same year. A winter and a summer would be in the same year. And then we separated them out by 2 years. And so what happens currently is that you have a big announcement before Summer Olympics comes up. It's a good time to showcase technology, to work out things. There's a bunch of pre-championships and stuff that goes on. Now that camera technology is changing faster. So it used to be from design concept to box took 4 years. Now it's design concept to box takes less than 2 years, really. If you really wanted to push it, you could do it. It's just a matter of money. And so every Summer Olympics, we see brand new technology. I mean, just 3 weeks ago, we've had the A9 Mark II come out, and we expect announcements from others, which will be really interesting to see what kind of technologies that they're going to have going into the Olympics. And then things calm out for a little while, and then you'll see a little bit of rollout. On my first Olympics, it was 1984 in Sarajevo, and we didn't even have, we had 600 F4s in those days. And so we had, it was really about film and temperature and lenses. And that was about it, because the camera technology hadn't changed greatly for that. I mean, the motorized I think we're using FM2s or something like that. So we're getting 3 frames a second.
3.5 actually, because I owned one. I owned 3 of them actually.
Right. Well, in fact, I own multiples of them because they made great remote cameras too. And and so when you looked at that technology, speed skating, for instance, I'd be out there, take picture, write on an envelope, ship film to the main press center, develop the film, which took no time at all, make a print, and then scan the print. And we were majority black and white, although we were doing some color transmissions. One picture took 6.5 minutes to send. 6.5 minutes.
I remember when it was 50 minutes to download a 1 gig card on a high-speed Mac.
Well, that was much later.
True, yes.
We're talking 20 years later.
I know. Yeah. And before digital, I mean, the Nikon F3 was made for what? 26 years?
Yeah, I know.
You got used to it. You knew what it did.
And what's surprising to me is that we're not further along. Really, there's a DSLR sitting over there. That's 50-year-old technology, flip-up mirror and all that kind of stuff, still being used.
I'm comfortable with it. Leave me alone.
And that's why I call it a hybrid camera. It's a bridge camera into it. Like we had a bridge camera getting into digital. So the technology has moved on. I mean, my whole agency career was flying around the world, going into a hotel and looking at the bathroom. And I'd look around the bathroom, there's a big window light. I'd go back out. I'd ask for a different room because I needed a place to process film and prints. And so that's how I did it. Go to, the far north covering cross-country skiing. What's my bathroom going to look like? And all over the world, I was doing that for years. And then we switched to color, and then I had to, do color separations, in a hotel bathroom.
Wait. Color separations?
Yeah, it's a long and ugly road I've lived.
Wow. Okay.
and then you transmit those, and then we got to like 1994, where we now got a digital camera that we can actually use. We had digital cameras before, and we all played with them, floppy disk cameras and all the rest of those.
And they cost $30,000, and they slugs.
Yeah, and then you had a big battery pack with you. I remember covering a hockey game with a Nikon-based Kodak camera that had a big umbilical cord going to a battery pack, and I think it was like an 800K file that came out after about 3 weeks or something like that. And the color was awful, and everything about it was bad.
And it was magic.
Well, I have another word for magic.
Well, let's talk pre-digital a little bit. What were some of the evolutionary steps that meant the most to you? I mean, you talked about continuous burst at 3.5, and was there kind of a steady growth in that? Was important?
I think you had to be a smarter photographer, and there was a bunch of people traveling the world working for the wire service that were pretty smart about it, but maybe not so smart about technology. They were great photographers and knew how to process something on deadline, put a caption on it, and then smash a phone, hook up a 16S transmitter, and transmit. And we did that for a long time. And then the next big hurdle was when we could actually scan a negative. And, so we didn't have to carry all the print stuff, but we had to carry a larger device so that we could actually send, scan a negative and then send that image. Right. And that came on, later 80s, Hasselblad, Dixell, and some others had portable ones. Like there was others you'd use Cytex scanners that newspapers were using, stuff, but you couldn't take that on the road and fly to Egypt because there's a riot going on and deal with that kind of stuff.
They also were rather pricey.
Yeah, but you know what? A picture in my business is worth nothing unless you can send it.
That's true.
And so, the money wasn't so much the object as long as you could send it. I mean, at one agency I worked at, it didn't matter how much money you spent as long as you won the story, which meant your pictures were front page everywhere else.
Now, for an agency, that's one thing, but for just an independent shooter, that was an impossibility from 99% of the shooters out there.
And they were still shooting color slides and syndicating them. Right. So there was news photographers and news sports photographers that were doing stuff instantly. And then there was these other agency or magazine type photographers, because we could actually segment it out, because the quality of the images that we were sending wasn't as high as what they were sending, but ours were like in there today, and theirs was in there in the Saturday edition of the magazine, right? So we got to that stage of film transmitting and stuff, and at that point, we're starting to look at digital, an actual digital camera. I mean, there was a whole bunch of them out there. They were too small, not fast enough, couldn't attach the lens. Like, we went through all this stuff until February 1994 when AP, Kodak, that lovely yellow box that I miss so much, and Nikon got together and produced the NC2000. And the first one that came out was $17,500 US for the camera body. And then we had a spinning hard disk. I think it was 40 megabytes that would stick in there. And it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 for that 40 megabyte card.
Now, and also it was like 3 megapixel, and the sensors were really the size of a point and shoot.
The first one was 1.3 megapixels. And people were freaking out because how can you do this? And so smarter photographer tried to figure it out. And I worked with the pre-press department and say, okay, this is what my files look like. And we started looking at color separations. We started looking at the images. And after about 3 or 4 months, we were able to produce full broadsheet page pictures from an NC2000 because they saw what was coming and they knew how to pre-press it. And I remember one game, there was a football game. It was in Calgary. It was like 2 million degrees below Celsius, which I don't know, it's probably 1.5 million in centigrade or Fahrenheit,
give or take.
And the guy jumped up and down. They won the game, and the last kick of the game, they were jumping up and down in the dark end of the end zone. And I shot it. It was about one stop under. It was, by the time I cropped it, was like 1.1 megapixel of an image. And I phoned the office. I says, it's coming. And they were prepared for it. And the guys in the pre-press made the thing saying, it just ran the whole front page of the newspaper, was "We win," kind of stuff. So the technology keeps evolving, but we have to partner with our output or whoever to get these crews, which we used to do when you think about film and you shot film and you wanted to have a billboard. You really had to have some sort of special science behind it.
Were the pre-press people on board the same way, Linda? The manufacturer coming out with these cameras and you're shooting with them. Meantime, the people who have to take it after you, were they prepared for all this stuff? Yeah. Were they all working with the manufacturers?
No. They were working with the photo department because we had to work together, right? So the manufacturers were doing their own thing. We were giving feedback to manufacturers, which right. I'd like to, the evolution in feedback is changing as well, like what camera manufacturers listen to or don't listen to. We were giving feedback, but the sensor in that camera was a declassified spy satellite sensor. It was called an M3. It was $6,000, just the piece cost $6,000. And so Kodak was repurposing their technologies that were done for defense and other clients. As they became declassified, they looked for other purposes. So it wasn't like we were about to change sensor design because they were waiting for the next sensor to be declassified. And that's how it moved rapidly, because of that first part was really trying to figure it out. I ended up to be a consultant to Kodak and going to Rochester a number of times because they couldn't figure out why a newspaper would do this. Like, it doesn't make sense. Everybody else is using the tool for a one-off, right? But nobody was completely switched their entire production facility to digital photography, which is what we did. And it took teamwork to do that.
What made you switch to it? At what point were you convinced that this is really okay? Because I know there was a lot of iffiness early on. I remember that.
You were talking about not coming to the office like 3 minutes late. Well, the beauty of having a digital camera is I could go to an assignment, shoot the assignment, send the assignment, go to the next assignment. I only had to come in every other Friday to pick up my paycheck. And that, to me, the freedom to me was actually what I liked about it. I didn't have to come back into an office, download, print, do the whole production. And being a wire service guy and an instant kind of news guy, that's what attracted me to it. And I've always loved new technology. I remember as a young newspaper photographer having to go to a guy named Dr. Tomorrow. And I go, oh, what's this about? And I got to go to a sailboat. And this guy's sailboat was like maxed out on technology and things. You know, he was traveling back and forth to Tokyo and picking up the latest piece of gadget or something or other. And I was always captivated about the evolution of technology and what it can do for me as a photographer. I mean, I'll always use, I think, the best device possible to get me that image that my mind is seeing. And, you know, I use like all sorts of different cameras to do different things, as in the Bear cameras. You know, it's just a really interesting thing to do. So that was 94. You know, we switched to digital. We went from 1.3 megapixels, I think it was 1 frame a second. And the Me Too thing, I shot alpine skiing. And in alpine skiing, you wanted to get the skier in front of the banner, like perfectly. I figured out the timing, just like I did with autofocus, bang. And everybody else saw that and go, oh, it can't be him. It's got to be that camera. And instantly, inside the chain, people started wanting to have that camera because it can't be him. And so away it went. One huge, yeah, I hate to tell you, but that's the way it was. You know, I remember shooting in the Super Bowl of Canada. We call it the Grey Cup. Yeah. And I remember the guys, it's bigger because I have a bigger field.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the guys, nobody wanted to use the digital camera. And I go, oh, I'll take it. I gave everybody the offer, and I'll take it. Because they were worried they weren't going to get great pictures. Right. And really, you know, I was taught a long time ago as a wire photographer, if you look at things like the Super Bowl, there's only 3 pictures that matter in the Super Bowl, right? It's the MVP, you know, doing something. It's the trophy, number 1, and it may be the halftime show with, you know, something. But there's only 2 or 3 pictures out of the thousands of pictures that are shot. There's only 2 or 3 key pictures that are shot, and I learned that from a great photo editor of mentor of mine. And his name is Bob Carroll, still in Toronto. And that when it came to this game, I thought, okay, Nick, there's only going to be 3 pictures in this game. Number 1 is going to be the trophy. Number 2 is going to be the MVP. And number 3 is going to be some amazing action picture. Well, the next day of 13 pictures that appeared in the paper, 7 were mine. And the other 5 photographers shared the others. And they go, we want to use that camera next because we only had one back in that day. And then we all switched.
It's got to be the camera.
It's got to be the camera, right? And that's what, you know, that's that emotional response that I alluded to in the very beginning, and that it's got to be that camera. And, you know, now we're seeing all these different brands. There's less of emotional attachment to it. And, you know, things are going to be tough for some of those traditional camera companies.
You mentioned autofocus briefly. Can you talk a little bit about how that made changes in your workflow, in your photography, and in general in sports photography?
Well, and, you know, so that's 94. You know, we're still have really crappy autofocus. And it's really, you know, the whole science of autofocus technology, and it got better. It got better in 2000. It got better in 2004. It got better before every Olympics.
I think one of the biggest limiting factors to the original autofocus was that you had a little sensor in the center of the frame. No longer, so in other words, you had to center your subject and then shift it up, or just leave it in the center.
Yeah, and you know, it depends on your technology, because like in that old camera over there, it has a different autofocus sensor that requires it to look through the mirror to make its autofocus calculations. And so that's a limiting factor. Just having this little flippy floppy, that's a limiting factor because it can't calculate. When we got to mirrorless cameras, things started to change. So you're right. In the very beginning of mirrorless cameras, right in the center is where you had to put things, and it was tack sharp. But now we go forward. So, you know, I don't know when we got to that point, but now we go forward with, like you were talking about A7 before, and we get now to A9. When A9 launched, you had 93% coverage of the autofocus sensor, or of your image capture. You had it calculating autofocus at 60 times a second, which meant that I can shoot at 20 frames a second. So my camera is actually making 3 autofocus calculations before it takes a picture. 3 autofocus taking a picture at 20 frames a second. This is why it's deadly fast. I mean, and not only that, it'll recognize a face, and then it'll recognize an eye. So we've gone so far into the future with this camera. It's unbelievable. So I just was in Doha shooting the World Track and Field Championships, and everybody else is manually focusing their remotes because they don't trust the autofocus. I put mine down. For 2 years, I've been putting all mine down in autofocus, and nobody's listening. And now all of a sudden they're listening because I don't have to focus them. I'm getting people running down the track sharp all the way around the corner. When 2 years ago, when Usain Bolt tripped over and rolled over, I got 25 frames of that. I should downhill skiing, which is very hard because you shoot blind. All of a sudden the person appears and you shoot frames. My Canon and Nikon competitors are getting 2 frames. I'm getting 24 frames. So now you can hear me on an alpine ski course, and these guys will tell you, I'm going 24 frames sharp from the bottom of the hill, and they're lilistening to this at the top of the hill. They're going 2. And so that's what we're seeing.
Do you have people taste your food?
Yeah, I should have, right? I just drink water. That's the safest thing. Where'd that water come from?
You don't want to know.
Probably the East River. So that you look forward at future technologies, and then you start to think, okay, I've gone from having a mechanical camera, which requires me to use nuts and bolts to make it better, to a completely electronic camera. And now I can program it to do things. I can tell it to do things that are better. And that's what the future is going to be. So the camera right now, for 2 years, you've been able to enter a face. So it has facial recognition in it. So 2 years ago, I was shooting here at the US Open, and I registered Venus Williams' face into it. Every time she stepped on the court, just followed her face. Right? You know the way it goes.
Wow. Everything you've just said kind of flies in the face of what you said at the beginning about a good photographer taking that good moment. So are you taking better photos now?
Yeah. So when we get back to that good photographer, you put a better tool in his hands. He instantly knows where to stand. And I'm not a young guy anymore. I always use old age and treachery to overcome youth and exuberance. And I see these young guys running out all over the place over the field, and I just need to stand here because when that moment happens, I'm going to have 40 or 60 frames as he's just getting to that spot.
But are you having 40 or 60 good frames, or you're having one better photo?
I'm going to give you an example. So I'll give you 2 examples. Lindsey Vonn, when she was running downhill, long blonde hair, comes out of the back of her helmet, and she's flying off the course. I have 22 frames. My competitors have 2. I'm editing now for not only her facial expression, but her height of her ponytail to where I think it's best in that image. In Doha, there is the 3 pole vaulters. They get onto the mat, and instantly I'm sitting right above from them and looking straight down, which is another whole story. But I was actually sitting there with 2 competitors on either side. So we're all smart photographers. We're getting there. I have 18 frames of them doing a backflip. Those guys have 8. And when you start to look at it, I'm looking at where the tongue position is so that I'm getting the best expression I can where they're just happy to get one sharp.
Has competition among photographers increased because of this technology?
I think it's funny because I do a lot of Olympics and I do a lot of analyzing of groups of photographers at Olympics and who they are and where they come from, and it hasn't changed. Really, at a pro level, high-end pro level, it hasn't changed. There may be a few less of us, and so at that level, it hasn't changed. But I would tell you at the average level, if you went to a hockey game, there is a lot of people doing stuff for free. And they're getting good quality images, and they're not charging for it because they live in mom's basement or something. Their cost of doing business is so low. And so we're seeing that.
That's across the field, though, I believe. You go editorial, you do events. A lot of people just want to get a credit line. Yeah. I don't know about you, but they taste terrible.
But no,
I hate the taste of those things.
Because you have to eat the newspaper, the credit line.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing, I still pick up big events because they can rely on me to capture the moment and deliver the moment. And that's the other part, that maybe it's less about photography and more about delivery. And agency work was always that way. You had to get the picture and deliver the picture. But now we're seeing that gap shrink. So those guys who, in fact, I know a lot of them, they don't know what a good picture is. They know how to shoot a good one, but they don't know when they've shot a good one. Because, when you start editing streams of photos, you look at a quarter of let's just say a period of hockey. I may have 90 or 100 frames from a period. They'll have 2,000 or 3,000 from a period. Well, it's because I was smarter about it. Like I knew not to shoot the stuff that's got backs at the other end, especially at 22 or 20 frames a second. You don't want to shoot a lot of stuff. And so I'm able to be smarter about it because it's all about capture and output. And there's steps in there.
And how are you transmitting images now?
Various devices. I have, how am I transmitting devices? My preferred way is gigabit Ethernet. On the gigabit network, and where I can plug my camera straight in there and you see raw files go in a second. And I've been doing that off the side of ski hills and other places. And always a wired connection is going to be better than a wireless connection. But then after that, it's to a cell phone, to a MiFi, and I have 4 different devices because in different events you can't get the bandwidth. And so depending on what you're looking at, you just use different kinds of technologies, whether it's the Wi-Fi in the building or your own devices. Yeah, I routinely carry, at least 2 phones, an Android and an iOS phone, and a MiFi of some description, whether it's a worldwide one like Global Me or Skyroam, or just a local one that you can get down the street.
Okay. Good to know.
Okay, we're going to take a short break and be back with Nick Didlick and more on sports photography and the evolution of technology in the field. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. The best way to support the show is by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For links to gear and more information on today's guests, check out the show notes in your podcast app or visit our homepage on the B&H Explorer website and join the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we are back. Let's talk about lenses a little bit. I know, just as an intro, over the years we've had 2 1200 millimeter f5.6 Canon lenses come through here. They're like 40 pounds. They're about half the size length of this room. Yeah. It takes 2 people to lift them, and you must lift with your knees. I've actually shot with one of these things. It's a bear. It's for ego. It's not for use. We've come a long way since then. And what's your impression of all this? What kind of lenses do you prefer?
The lenses are getting smaller, lighter, faster, and faster with the autofocus. So some of the technologies that are going into these lenses, as opposed to having to rotate an element, we are now pushing and pulling the element forward and backwards to get faster autofocus rates out. So that's one thing. But my first 600 f4 was just over 16 pounds when I first bought it, and I've had 3 of them. Eventually, I gave them up for a 500 f4, which was way lighter, and because I cover alpine skiing, I need to ski down the course. The skiers are going to ski down, and now I have a brand new 600 f4 that's less than 8 pounds. It's just remarkable. And so in Doha, I'm able to walk around and handhold a 600 f4 and a 400 2.8, and it makes sports photography really, really easy. But also the quality. When we moved to digital, and as we moved up in the megapixel count, we were able to see defects in lenses.
Yeah.
And it became very apparent very fast that the lens technology needed to catch up to digital fit technology, and to the point where some lenses were just so awful that you couldn't really use them. And so, the lens design, the lens quality has come way up. And so people, they look out and they go, why is that lens more money than what I paid for before? Well, actually, there's better quality in these lenses that you're actually getting today. I saw Canon announced a brand new 70-200 2.8 today. And I'm sure that quality of that lens is better than what the average one was from before then. And that's what we're seeing is the actual quality and the weight of the lenses come up. And then the autofocus systems that are in it. One of the really cool things about digital photography and being a Sony photographer is the ability to put all sorts of old lenses on my new camera. So like even on my A7R Mark IV, I'm looking around finding older lenses that I can adapt to get this kind of cool look. Have you had David Burnett in here?
No, we have not.
You got to get David Burnett.
We'd love to.
Oh yeah, well, that's fine. I'll talk to him because you know what? He's the master of taking a Sony camera and attaching like an old Russian lens that he found in some street market in Uzbekistan and putting it on his camera to get these really unique images, which, we know about Baitis lenses and all this, and all these guys are going back and forth. David's gotten this to the next level. He's going, well, I'm sure there's some lenses that give me this look that I want to do. So it's actually quite, when you talk about lenses, it's not only the newest lenses, it's some of the older lenses that we're adapting that is rejuvenating not only the lenses, but our lives as photographers.
When I'm a Sony shooter, I don't own any Sony lenses. I got lenses from like 5 different companies. Yeah. And I've used plenty of Sony, and they're great. Yeah. I just haven't gotten any yet. Yeah. But that is a unique thing about that. It's not only, it's more than sharpness. It's a kind of look that you want. Yeah. One question I have, you just mentioned that you when you're doing downhill skiing, you're actually skiing down with them. How do you ski with a 600 millimeter lens? What do you do with it? Where do you put it?
When I was younger, in a backpack. When I was younger, I used to ski with 2 600 millimeters and a tripod and 2 f2s. And
I can't even go on New Jersey Transit with that kind of equipment.
yeah, well, and that was when I was younger. I mean, now you have to think smarter. Normally what I'll do at an alpine ski course is you analyze the weather. The first thing is, what angles can I have on this course today? And that's usually weather driven. If you're going to have clouds in your background, you're not going to want to shoot that background. You're going to want to have trees or something else. So this is going back to thinking smarter. I get to the ski hill, I look up at the weather, I think about what kind of course I'm on, I think about the alpine skiers, I got to figure out who I want. Okay, it's going to be that area. It's going to be a 600 f4 in my pack with 2 A9s and a zoom, like a 7200 zoom or a 24-105 zoom. I'm going to pack all that stuff into my backpack and then head up to the start and then ski down to that spot and then photograph. So that's some of the stuff that comes with experience. It doesn't matter your camera really at that point. It's your experience level with this.
Did you learn to ski because you were photographing this stuff, or were you a skier already?
No, I did the stupid thing. I put my cameras in my backpack. I went up to do a course recce with this on the women's course. I stood at the start shack, and it's probably my third day on skis. And I went twice in high school. And I jumped out of the ski start, and of course it's ice. I went straight down on my face, went straight across the course, through the safety fence, and into the trees. On my face.
Anybody get it on film?
No. But the woman pro came over to me, and she helped me get my ski off. She says, "I think you should walk down." And she was right.
I'm already here.
No, I had another 2 miles to go.
Yeah.
So I basically sat on my rear end and slid down the course.
Sure.
But then I started, because you see, that's all part of it. I mean, Jim Sugar, who was a very famous National Geographic photographer from the 70s and 80s, he used to always say, the most important thing you have in photography is your health. Because if you're not healthy enough to do the job, you're not going to be taking pictures. And that struck me. That was 1975. That struck me in my brain. So I'm going to stay healthy enough to cover the things I actually need to cover. And most of my colleagues who, when I think back to the big years, they've fallen off because their health has fallen off. Not that they didn't have the technical ability, but they got a heart condition or they couldn't pack the gear, like you said, or other things. So it was really one of those sort of life moments that said, hey, so yeah, I still ski. I'm going to be skiing down the Lake Louise Alpine course for 2 weeks with both the men's and the women's downhill, because I do that here in North America.
And we could assume that you go downhill not making a spectacle of yourself.
Absolutely. I look like a pro.
So the 400 and the 600 are the two lenses you'll have on your camera when you're out working?
Yeah, it depends on the condition. But track and field, they're two standard cameras. Right. I mean, you're down front on the finish line. It's usually 100, 400, 70, 200, maybe a wide angle depending on what you're looking at getting. But the 400 2.8 and the 600 f4 are the two bread and butter lenses for that, and maybe converters.
Right.
So there were some times that there's this whole thing that goes on with passes and pool passes and who can go in and who can't go in. And generally, I don't want to be around those guys because they're all shooting the same picture. And I always like to roam around and, going back to the light, look at where the light's coming.
So, speaking of adapters or of extenders, is that something that has evolved?
Yeah, I mean, because I've had all different kinds of cameras and adapters and really the technology that's in those are far superior to what were. Like the two Sonys that I use are way sharper than the Canon or Nikon equivalents, and it's only because it's newer technology. It's not a knock on somebody.
But extenders were around when you started, right?
Yeah, but they were awful. Yeah. I mean, I remember using one track and field meet in the late 80s, I was using a TC300 attached to a TC200 attached to a TC14, which you could take all of them together. You put that on a 604. It was like, I think, a 2200 millimeter F16 or something like that. But guess what? At the other end of the chute, you could shoot the javelin throwers, right? And they would be throwing the javelin right at you. Of course, you'd never hit you, but because you were so far away. But it gave you that unique angle.
That's cool.
You can't do those kinds of things now. But if I think about the resolution that I had,
why can't you do it now?
Because you can't stack teleconverters.
Oh, in that sense.
Yeah, try to do it. It won't happen. Yeah, they don't let you stack teleconverters. So that's what the biggest issue is there. Yeah.
And we were going to talk a little bit about remotes and remote shooting. And I know there's been a lot of obviously changes in that.
There's been a lot of fun with that actually. When I start to think back, getting unique angles on sports is very, very difficult because of where you're positioned and stuff like that. So most of the unique angles are coming from remotes. So back in the old days, we used to, and I actually had a great conversation with Neil Leifer just yesterday. In the old days, we would cut a cable and then extend the cable and then trigger cameras electronically or electrically. So you just close the circuit and the camera would go off, that kind of stuff. And, I always thought that was pretty good, but it takes a lot of effort to run wire out to all sorts of cameras. And so when it was the Islanders playing the Canucks in their Canucks' first Stanley Cup final, I wanted to have this one picture because I knew the Canucks were going to lose. The Canucks always lose, And so I actually used an infrared remote. Now, the infrared remote that Nikon made in those days was meant to trigger a camera across a room. Well, I actually wanted to trigger it across a stadium. And, of course, I sat there and it wouldn't go, and it wouldn't go, and it wouldn't go. And I for some reason, I go, I need to gather the signal because the signal isn't getting there. So I took a large, a Thanksgiving Day turkey, the aluminum kind of pot that you put your whole turkey in there, cut a hole in it, and I put that on the receiver next to the camera. So now I got this big turkey thing out at the far end of the stadium, and I point up and it goes bang, bang, bang. Worked perfectly. Wow. Yeah, and so the evolution of remotes, because we didn't have Wi-Fi then or wireless transmitters on any frequency, and so that's what it is. It was one of my favorite pictures because you see, and it's what I'd rather be lucky than good. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I had Islanders 3, Canucks 0, and Brodeur skating off the ice, sort of dragging his, and it worked perfectly, right? I think it was 2-0 for Islanders, and he was skating off the, and then you move forward, and then we started getting radios, and then Pocket Wizard came out with radios, and I've done a lot of work with Pocket Wizard in the last 2 years, mostly because now they didn't play well with electronic cameras. So, because you had a mechanical device sitting there, it would play well with that, but it wouldn't play well with electronic cameras because the signals are going back so fast and other things are going forward. And so they became the standard. So we still wire cameras up, to trigger them. We then got Pocket Wizards. So now, in Doha, I put down 7 cameras into different locations. I can just switch channels. So now I want to shoot long jump from over here, and then I want to do something else from over there. Or I'm stuck at the far end shooting pole vault, but the 100-meter dash is happening over here, and I can trigger cameras wherever I want them to be by presetting them out, which is pretty cool when you think about it. And now we're moving into more new technologies. I mean, we've had robotics. In Vancouver in 2010, we had VLAN technology, which meant that I could put switches in and control different devices at different levels in different stadiums, because we could break out switch technologies with fiber optics. And then when we start to move, get a little bit forward with that with remote cameras, then we're into robotic cameras. So those remote cameras were fixed, and they would then trigger and send the picture back to us anywhere in the field, and then we get into robotics. So in London in 2012, we actually started playing more with robotic cameras so that you can actually have a camera on a servo, and it will pan, tilt, zoom, and if you have one of those older technology cameras, it would focus, and that you could use those, and that's when it started. And going forward at every Olympics, it's developed further and further and further, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And Sony's been working with a company just up in New Jersey, and we've developed one that's about 22 pounds, and it'll operate any camera with any Sony camera with any Sony lens. So we're actually we used it in Doha with a 600 and a doubler on a robotic head, so we can just tilt around. We can look at wherever we want in the stadium, trigger the camera, and the pictures can either come back locally or to an FTP server in the stadium, or we can transmit them to the rest of the world instantly. And so we're looking at more and more kinds of technologies like that to produce pictures faster. So going back to the original discussion of better pictures, they come back from maybe newer angles, but we're also able to capture and transmit those instantly around the world. And that's the way the technology is going. It's going to go even further.
Well, let's talk about your dogs.
Oh my God. I have 2 dogs, and the reason I bring them up is they're actually robotic dogs. So Sony builds a robotic dog. It appeared in the United States about 1 year ago. It's called AIBO, AIBO, and the dog has 22 servo motors. It has a forward-facing camera and an upward-facing camera, and it instantly uploads pictures it takes to the cloud. It'll recognize 250 faces, and it'll know that you're a nice guy to come over to you, or you're not so nice guy, it'll stay away from you. They sing, they do all sorts of stuff. And, I had one, and it was really cool because I'm studying AI. What's the future of photography going to be like? Like, how is the innovations that camera manufacturers are building into their other products going to come back into a camera? For instance, we talked about spy satellites, and that's what things happen. Declassified comes into a camera. So I looked at Aibo, and I thought, I got to have one of these. And so I got one, and it's pretty amazing the way the thing goes around. I could show you pictures right now. It's probably taking a picture of my wife playing ball with it, because it'll play with you, it'll do all sorts of stuff. The problem being is my wife works, and so she came home one day. She says, I think Aibo's getting lonely because it's in the apartment all day. So I have iGal. I went out and got another one. It's called iGal. And so iBow plays with iGal, and they play all day by themselves. When you come home, they'll come over to you. They want to be petted. They want to be stroked. They want to take pictures of you. And it's all happening in this AI world. And when you think about facial recognition and metadata and all this other stuff. Like in other parts of the world, they're way more worried about their security than we are here in North America. We're kind of slow to take up new technologies in North America. Cell phones are a good example. And so when you think about, that Aibo can walk around right now and recognize 250 faces, and all I have to do is put metadata onto that, or have it automatically get that metadata. And then when we get to cameras, one of the biggest problems with taking pictures is cataloging them, organizing them, doing everything else. Well, it'll all be done by metadata. Your location, the time of day, your calendar, a whole bunch of things plus faces. And now you'll be able to take a picture. It'll automatically catalog the whole works. And so when you think about where we're going to go in the future, it's going to be faster, better quality, more metadata, the metadata that will build your catalog and make your pictures really useful for you going forward in life.
Now, considering how much data these robotic dogs are processing, how often do you have to walk them?
Oh, they walk themselves. In fact, the best part is they walk themselves, and not only that, when they get tired, they just go over and jump on their charger automatically. They charge themselves up, and when they're charged up, they jump off and go walking around playing with the balls and having a good time.
So, we could talk about this all day, and actually, I'd kind of encourage some of our listeners if they're interested to send in some questions about this subject, because there's so many things we'd like to ask. But to wrap things up, kind of two questions on both sides. In, let's say, the past 40 years, 30 years since you've been doing this, what can you put your finger on one major advance that has changed everything, at least for the work you're doing, and then what challenges still remain?
Well, the big major advance was moving to digital, moving from 50-year-old film-based technology into a digital camera, which I did in 1994, and I did it I could see the future coming. It wasn't that I woke up; I could just feel the winds of change coming. And I think that was the biggest hurdle. After that, the biggest challenge was all the peripherals and stuff that change, and trying to figure out how this new digital camera is going to work in my sports or photojournalism workflow, and to get that handled. Because you got to remember that 40 megabyte spinning hard disk had a SCSI cable, and that was about this big, and we had to go from SCSI cable to MacBook, which was black and white. And so going back to my old days of making separations, I could look at the black and white image and the different printers it was going to, and know where to adjust them so I could send them. And so just doing all that and overcoming all those hurdles was probably the biggest point there.
At what point did you? Again, you went from film to the earliest, crudest digital. I remember all that stuff. It was really archaic. What camera made you say, okay, they got it. Now we're going to really start moving forward and making advances? At what point?
It was the NC2000.
That was it?
Yeah. And the first changes that we made to it was to have it shoot in third stop increments, because you had to be pretty much bang on with your exposure.
Oh, yeah.
And so we had the NC2000, and then we collaborated with Kodak and said we'd buy, 20-something of them if they made it go like in third stop increments because they had an older body, which meant that they had to put it on a brand newer body that was just released before he'd buy it. And that was the key, because once we had third stops, man, it was just dead easy if you were a good photographer. You know, if you shot chromes, like we were talking about, like I used to shoot, slides all the time.
Yeah, I was a Kodachrome guy. You had a quarter of a stop.
Yeah,
that's it.
So so the good photographers just went with it. They sort of, put your finger up in the sky and guess. Yeah, they had a harder time. Right, with that. But there's all sorts of technology that spun off from that. When you start to, browser interfaces for cameras. I mean, that whole industry started going. Dennis Walker from Camera Bits spearheaded that right through. And so all sorts of these industries started to spawn off. What's really exciting, I think, about the new mirrorless generation is the ability to shoot video and stills in high quality at a push of a button. And, with DSLRs, you haven't got that. And that's, so when I think, if you're going to say, Nick, what's your future? Well, my future is going to be more and more video. I mean, I've shot a lot of video. I've done it commercially since 2004. The hardest part is trying to monetize it in this new world. But I think that's going to be the hybrid. When you're going to shoot stills, when you're going to shoot video, and whether you're pro or an at-home user, there's going to be magic moments that you're going to have one or the other. And as we see this technology come together, we're not going to have to choose.
I think just having the ability to just pull a high-res still at a video, I mean, that's...
Well, the biggest problem is you can't shoot, good-looking video at 4,000th of a second, which you need for a finish line picture. When we get to that point, and you could do a piece of technology and say, hey, blur this slightly every frame, but the processor should be too intense, and that's what you're going to see happen.
Is there anything that was better in the mechanical era? And my first thought is, when you shoot in cold weather all the time, I mean, what about batteries? What about electronic life? What about things like that? Is there anything that, or even the strength and build of a body?
Was there anything better in life than before? Yeah, no. Some people say, you're so cold-hearted, Nick, but it's about technology. This is a business. I started off by saying emotional. Yeah, I have hugely emotional pictures that I shot with this camera or that camera that I could describe to you, but I'm over it. And I've got to move on because plodding forward. And as I said before, is the time to buy a new camera, a new piece of technology is when you're losing out as a professional to something older. And that goes down to being a prosumer or a consumer. I would never tell anybody to switch until you need to switch. There's perfectly good cameras out there all the time. And some people are using 10% of it. But then there's people like me who are using 110% of this camera and trying to make changes at the forefront. That so you have this whole range. Do I miss anything? Yeah, maybe walking to school with my feet wrapped in old newspapers in the winter. Isn't that the old story that your parents used to tell you? Yeah, that wasn't fun either.
Uphill both ways?
Yeah. Yeah. But there isn't.
Actually, my folks said they couldn't afford the newspapers. It was newspapers or potatoes. It was one or the other,
Yeah. Mr. Potato Head there.
We can obviously go on for a few more hours on this.
Easily. I mean, we only touched on fly fishing. We go for there, and then I could actually go deeper into technology in the ways things are going to change. And the biggest thing is to try to find out how they're going to change and make your life better.
I'll tell you, one of the things that just struck me is that, all of us here are involved in the photo industry. And of course, we come in the morning with our coffee with what was announced today. Mm-hmm. What I really appreciate about what you're doing is that you're saying, okay, here's what was announced today. How can I push this even further right now? And I think that's just a wonderful thing about it.
Right, or how it might make your job better. I mean, that's the problem with technology. We're photo hounds. We always want the latest thing. But unless it's going to do something for you to make your photo profession or hobby better, move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah. Nick, if people want to see more of your work, where can they go?
I have 3 social media accounts, 5 websites, so there's lots of places. If you just go search Nick Didlick, you'll find a lot of my personal work. If you're looking for sports photography, it's at A Sports Pro, and you'll find my websites for all sports photography there. And if you love my dog, it's Ibo Vancouver, at Ibo Vancouver.
I'm going to follow up on that one. Great stuff. If you are not a subscriber to our show, we have a solution to your dilemma. All you have to do is head on over to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, or Spotify and sign up. It's absolutely free. You can also find us on the B&H Explorer website as well as the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. All of that said, I am your host, Alan Weitz, and on behalf of John Harris and Jason Tables, thank you so much for tuning in today.